I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. And the first item on business is work session. Do I have a motion, please, to go into work session?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Chair Palettis?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And the purpose of our work session tonight is to go over the budget. And Mr. Meadows?
Bill handing my budget, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to work from down here tonight so I can run the PowerPoint presentation and talk at the same time. I believe this afternoon about 4 or 4:30, we uploaded the budget documents, including the budget message, to Dropbox, so you've got a copy of that. And you've also got, for those of you that would like one, we have copies of the books available as well. And I believe we handed out the copy of the presentation, so everybody should have one of those. So if at any point you have a question, stop me. But what I'd like to do is just give you a general overview of my budget proposal to the board for the upcoming fiscal year, and let you have an opportunity to start digesting that. And as you're well aware, we've got a number of meetings coming up in the weeks ahead to discuss the budget. For fiscal year 2013-2014, the total proposed budget for the county is $167.9 million. That represents a $4.5 million increase, or 2.8% increase over the current year budget. We do have $1 million in growth in general fund. We also are looking at approximately $4.4 million in growth in the school's operating funds. We do have a reduction in debt service for the upcoming fiscal year, and we have eliminated the revenue stabilization fund for the upcoming year. So the net general fund is about a $500,000 increase, the debt service fund is a $400,000 decrease, and the school's fund is $4.4 million for a total of $4.5 million. And I'll get into a little bit more of how that breaks down in just a moment. For fiscal year 14, we've experienced the revenues are coming from about $2.8 million in growth in the general fund. We've had a very positive year. We're certainly not back to where we were before the Great Recession of a couple of years ago, but we have seen some growth in the general fund. We're also very optimistic that with the passage of the liquor by the drink legislation in this last General Assembly session, that our two exits, exit 109 and exit 128 off the interstate, have a much added potential for growth, especially the 109 interchange, which has already had a great deal of interest from developers. And also, as you're well aware, we're working closely with a developer for a new development for the old Blacksburg Middle School property, which would generate significant taxable investment for that property as well. I am proposing in this current, or in the proposed budget, excuse me, that we would be looking at a 2-cent or a 2% real estate tax increase, increasing the property tax from the current 87 cents to 89 cents, and I'll talk a little bit more about the thoughts on that in just a minute. I'm also recommending that we consider an increase in the personal property tax rate to $2.55 per hundred, which represents a 4% increase, or 10-cent tax rate increase over the current personal property tax. The personal property tax increase would generate about a $500,000. The real estate increase would generate $1.4 million. We did receive about $250,000 back into the budget from not having to fund the flexible cut that the state has been passing down. We also received about $600,000 more from the state for schools in the coming year. So as this slide shows, total revenue growth of about $4.5 million.
Excuse me, Craig.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, can you go back to the previous slide for a second?
I hope so. Let's see.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Could you just explain the dollars in red there, the general fund designated and the incentives to the EDA?
Do you want to help me on that one, Mark? On the,
Do you want some water? Do you want a bottle of water?
EDA, when we show the dollars from growth, that includes the new industries that the extra tax dollars we've generated from the new industries and the growth in the existing industries. But for part of that growth, we also provided incentives, performance-based incentives. If they met certain objectives, we would provide incentives for some of that. So the $400,000 represents the incentives that we pay back to the companies based on meeting their projections. And I'll let Mark talk about the general fund designated.
Yeah, basically, the designated funds in the general fund were relatively flat. There was a $700,000 drop in revenue for social services, but that had an expenditure of $700,000. So you're seeing $700,000 go down on the revenue side, but it's matched off with $700,000 on the expense side, which when you look in the book, you'll be able to see that decrease on both sides.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Moving on to the next slide. This basically shows where the revenues come from for the upcoming fiscal year. As you can see, 44% of those are designated dollars that come to the county for schools and other designated purposes. The real estate and personal property taxes also generate about 44% of the revenue that we receive. 5% comes from sales taxes, and then a few other small areas. But again, the bulk of our revenues come from the real estate tax, personal property tax, and designated dollars that are passed through to other responsibilities. For undesignated revenue, of the total revenues we received, 94.7 million of those are undesignated. Again, of the undesignated revenue, 79% of that comes from the real estate and personal property tax. So these slides are in here just to emphasize the point again that outside of real estate taxes and personal property taxes, there's really not many other sources of revenue for our county. Where does the budget go? Of this $167.9 million for the upcoming fiscal year, 60% of the money is designated for all the school funds. An additional 15% is debt service, a good bit of which is also related to the construction and funding for the schools. Only about a quarter of the budget, 25%, goes to fund the general fund operations. And then less than 1% for the law library and less than 1% for capital. As far as the general fund budget itself, of the $42.5 million, 33% is public safety, 18% is health and welfare, 12% are general services. Those three areas alone comprise nearly 2/3 of the budget. The rest is made up of general government administration and other various departments. As far as the school budget goes, this is kind of a interesting pie. Of the slightly more than $100 million for the upcoming fiscal year 14 schools budget, 95% of that is related to operating expense. Cafeteria fund is 4%, and schools capital is approximately 1%. This slide just reflects the continued growth in funding for the county schools over the last 10 fiscal years. The county has increased funding for the schools to the tune of $12 million. We continue to point out to the state, of course, that the responsibilities that keep getting shifted to the localities, but that's just a realization that we continue to provide more money to make up that difference, and this budget again this year recommends that as well. A little more specifically on the school increases, for the school operating fund, my budget proposes that $2.8 million in new funding be provided for the schools. 2.2 is additional county funds for school operations. To fund that, we're using $1.7 million of the new growth dollars and $500,000 of the personal property tax increase. That's what makes up the county's portion of that 2.8. And then, as I mentioned earlier, $600,000 is coming from the state in additional funding for the schools. But as you can see from that very clearly, $2.2 million from the county and only $600,000 from the state to try to make up some of that difference. The 2-cent real estate tax increase that I mentioned earlier, I'm proposing that that money be set aside for additional county funds for school capital needs. As you've heard over the last year, really over the last several years, we have a number of significant challenges with regard to capital needs for our schools. We also have significant capital needs for the county as well, and I don't want to slight the needs of the county. As a matter of fact, we'll be talking about that more as we have some further conversations about the use of the remaining one-time money that we had from last year's tax increase. But I am recommending that we take that 2-cent real estate proposed tax increase and set that money aside to begin to provide for funding to address future capital needs of the schools. My big concern for the county is I do not want to ever see us get in a position where we have to have a double-digit tax increase again to fund critical school needs, and this is an attempt to try to start addressing that. Where did the tax rate increase and the growth dollars go? As I just mentioned, the 2-cent real estate tax increase, which generates $1.4 million, I'm recommending be set aside for future school capital needs to be used for that. The personal property tax increase of 10 cents, which will generate about $500,000, I'm recommending that $500,000 be designated to help fund the school operational shortfall. The growth dollars that we had in the general fund of $2.4 million, $1.7 million of that would go to school operations, and $700,000 would go to the county to fund general fund needs in the county. The state increase of $900,000, $600,000 of that's for school operations, and the remaining $300,000 would go for general fund needs in the schools. I do want to mention that, as always, we don't prepare a zero-based budget here. We don't go back and go through the entire budget from zero every year, but we do, as Carol has called it in the past, we do challenge the base budget assumptions. We go back and take a hard look at what's in the base budget and try to find opportunities for savings, either through changes in personnel or just opportunities to find savings within the operating budget. And we did identify opportunities to reduce, if you will, the base budget by $226,532. So I want to commend staff for working hard to try to identify ways to further reduce the current operating budget. One item that we debated quite a bit was whether to make an adjustment or recommend an adjustment in the personal property tax. The personal property tax in Montgomery County has not been increased since 1994. A lot of that had to do with the way the tax relief was given for that car tax, if you will, back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. In the past, we could not increase the rate due to the PPTRA policy, or the car tax relief policy, of not increasing the rate on the first $20,000 of value on a qualifying vehicle. Since the state elected several years ago to just give localities a fixed amount rather than a running percentage, that rule does no longer apply. So we do have the ability to adjust personal property tax rates. As a matter of fact, a number of communities last year adjusted personal property tax rates. As I mentioned, ours has not been adjusted since 1994. We had a good bit of discussion about, by increasing the personal property tax rate, you're in essence spreading the burden to other folks in the county. A lot of folks do not own real estate, and this is an opportunity to try to recoup some additional revenues from those. The proposed tax increase, if the board approved on a $20,000 vehicle after the tax relief is applied, it would be approximately $20 per year. So if you had a $20,000 car, this increase would affect you about $20 a year. Yes, sir.
When you looked at the increase on the personal property tax, did you guys look at some counties our size to see what their rate was?
Yes, sir. And
I mean, I know we couldn't compare our personal property tax rate with Craig County, but counties, I guess we have like per counties that we
did.
do things with.
Did we include anything in the book on that, or? I know we've got a pretty good chart that we'll certainly provide to you through the process.
Okay.
We did look at a bunch of different localities across the state, and one of the things you have to look at is not just the rate, but the value structure that is applied to that. In other words, we are currently at trade value, and some localities are at loan value. So when you apply the rate to a different value structure, you get a different dollar amount. So one of the things that I looked at was how did we compare to different localities, and so I chose Roanoke County just as a marker to see where we were in relation to them. And when you apply their rate to their structure for the same vehicle, our rate would have to be $3.15 in order to have the same tax liability on that individual. So in other words, for somebody that had a $20,000 vehicle in Roanoke County, and for our tax to equal the same tax dollar amount, for them, our rate would have to be $3.15. So we did look at that, and going from $2.45 to $2.55 is still not getting us anywhere close to what it is, just a few miles up the road.
Thank you.
Of course, one thing that we talk about every year is the two primary drivers of our budget are public education and public safety. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the additional funding that is in this proposed budget for public safety purposes. We're very fortunate this year, and as you recall, in the past 2 years, we've had significant increases from operations for the Western Virginia Regional Jail. That was largely due to the fact our population numbers continued to swell significantly. We've sort of leveled off this year. The calculations are based on a 3-year average that we use at the regional jail to provide the charges back to the localities, and this year we've leveled off somewhat. So the increase for the regional jail this year is $60,000 as opposed to several hundred thousand as it's been the last couple of years. The sheriff had requested a number of other increases in his budget, and there's more about that in the book, but we recommended adding $36,000 for ammunition and body armor, $10,000 additional for sheriff uniform replacements, $28,000 additional for vehicle replacements, $16,578 for training, $41,468 for repairs to the air conditioners at the jail, our local jail here, $70,752 added for the food budget here.
Craig, can I ask about that? The food budget going up $70,000. Is that for our local jail? And where did that number come from, if you don't mind?
I'll let the experts explain that.
Basically, if you look in the budget, there's a write-up there that describes the increases there. But essentially, what has happened is over the years, they had a base budget of like $60,000, $50 to $60,000, and they were using salary savings to move money at the end of the year in order to cover the cost of the food budget at the jail. So. We knew this was a problem that we needed to address, because if the sheriff didn't have salary savings, they wouldn't be able to pay for that. So essentially, I took last year's actual expenditures and inflated them by the rate of inflation to figure out how much money we needed, and then it amounted to about $125,000 is what they're actually paying, but they were using $70,000 in salary savings in order to cover it, and so that was not going to continue, and we needed to do something to address it.
So it's not an actual increase. We've been spending something near that minus inflation.
You got it.
But okay,
yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. We did add $80,000 as well for fire and rescue, and that's to give them the ability to have some additional training in some areas that have been identified as concerns. Also, the $76,525 that's added for the 911 authority. As you're aware, we're about 2 years away from fully implementing the regional dispatch operations in the 911 authority. In the upcoming year, we will have to add some additional positions in that group to get ready for the next phase. And this funding, each of the localities is picking up $76,525 of that to allow for additional staffing so that we can be ready for that next phase. As in years past, I'm also recommending that 1 penny of the real estate tax rate, or $700,000, continue to be earmarked for fire and rescue capital equipment. The Fire and Rescue Commission does an outstanding job of working with the funds they receive each year and shares those across the board among the agencies in a very fair manner. And I would recommend that we continue to fund that group in that manner. There are 4 personnel changes I'm recommending in this budget, and this is the first time in this is my 4th budget that I've presented to you guys, and this is the first time that I've recommending adding a couple of positions. One position, and the dollars that you see associated with these positions are salaries and benefits. It's not just a salary. The first position that I'm recommending we consider adding is a communications specialist. One thing that I've had numerous conversations with the school superintendent about areas that we can start working together to try to gain some efficiencies and hopefully do a better job all the way around. One area that we have some concern about are the websites that both the county and the schools maintain. Right now, they're currently, the management of the websites, I think on the school side, the county clerk, or excuse me, the school board clerk, who also handles public information and a lot of other duties, handles the website for the schools. On the county side, Ruth Ritchie and public information handle the bulk of our website operations with some support from IT and also from economic development. But I'd like to recommend with this communication specialist position is that we create, in essence, a webmaster position that will work with the schools and the county both. They will serve both organizations to help modernize, update the websites as needed, and also, as you're well aware, the increasing use of social media, Facebook, Twitter, all these things, we need support to stay current with those type activities, and that's what this position would be charged with. Another position that I've had quite a bit of conversation with Helen Royal and the folks in the Commissioner's office is a business auditor position. This position would work in conjunction with the Finance Department and the Commissioner's office to improve the county's revenue generation and collection processes. This also includes the proration of personal property. The Commissioner is very eager to move forward with the developing a system to be able to prorate personal property tax. That's an area that we don't do now, and if we did provide that, we would probably generate a considerable amount of money each year by prorating taxes rather than waiting a full year for things to be listed. Also, occasionally we have businesses that hire CPAs that come in and audit their machinery and tools filings and other items and seek refunds from the county because of some of those things. But we don't ever do anything in the other direction. We don't go out and verify that folks that need to have proper licenses have them. We don't go out and verify that the machinery and tools forms that we get filed each year, we don't audit any of those to ensure that those are truly showing what they should show. I feel very confident in talking with our finance folks and our commissioner that a position such as a business auditor would more than pay for itself in the revenues that we could generate from that. Another area, and this is a frozen position that I'm recommending that we unfreeze and add back to the budget, is a finance manager position. This position is being added back to provide the skills necessary to address additional financial reporting and auditing functions The two big areas there are the New River Valley Regional Communications Authority, which is, as I said earlier, coming up to full speed within the next 2 years, and the tourism program. We are the physical agent, excuse me, the county is the physical agent for both those operations. This position, when it was frozen 2.5, 3 years ago, we knew that at some point we would probably reach a service level and demand that we would need to consider adding it back, and I would advocate that this is the year that we need to try to do that. And finally, we're looking to add a half-time administrative position back in economic development. This is a non-classified half-time administrative position to assist the department in daily workload. The department has had a frozen full-time position, frozen for a couple of years since the person who was in that role left. The half-time position would be added in lieu of unfreezing the full-time position.
Great, great. Before you move on.
Yes, sir.
The number of, I'm sure that the county have a number of authorized positions. Over the past 2-3 years, a number of positions have been frozen. They had to go before the freeze committee before they could get authorization to fill those positions. How many, I guess, frozen positions do we have roughly in Montgomery County right now?
She can bring the number, and if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but I believe since we implemented the frozen positions, this is the first one that we've recommended to unfreeze. The rest of them have remained frozen, but I can't tell you the number.
We eliminated 10 positions when we started that, and then we have frozen about 13 more. It's a 5% decrease in the total number of FTEs since we started doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Some other increases that are proposed in the upcoming budget, $17,282 to increase the hours of the health clinic by 4 hours per week. That continues to be a booming success and allows our workers to not have to take time away from the office to go see a doctor. They can visit the nurse, which is located right out here in the hall. $14,573 is added to increase the technology infrastructure for the library. $35,475 is added to the registrar to replace poll books and begin the process of replacing the county's touchscreen voting machines. I will tell you on that line, the registrar did ask for considerably more than that, but we feel like we need to phase that in as opposed to trying to do it all in a lump. $52,600 is added to general contingencies to keep the contingency fund at 1% of the general fund budget. Supervisor Biggs, you had asked about that, I think, at a previous meeting. Each year we budget 1% of the total general fund budget as a contingency fund to be used in case of emergency for operating expenses. Then if that money's not spent at the end of the year, it just falls to year-end fund balance. $625,000 is added in this budget for health insurance increases. This is the worst case scenario for that number, but at this point in the process, we needed to include a number, so we've included $625,000. I do anticipate that number to go down. I cannot tell you right now until we have further discussion, which I'll talk about in a minute. I can't tell you how much, but I'm hoping that that is a worst case scenario. The last item, $500,000 is added to address compensation issues for county employees. We had quite a bit of discussion about looking at doing an across-the-board cost of living increase or setting aside certain funds for a merit increase. As you're well aware, we have done a pay and classification study, or we've had a pay and classification study done to look at a number of departments in the county. One thing that we have found is countywide, not just in the sheriff's office, not just in certain other places, we have some very serious what are called compression issues. The best way I can explain that is where an employee that's been with the county a year or 2 years is making very close to what employees that have been here 6 and 7 years are making. That is of concern simply from the aspect that as the economy continues to improve, folks that have 6 or 7 years of experience tend to start looking elsewhere if they feel they can earn higher dollars elsewhere. And my concern for wanting to address this issue is we have a number of employees that are in that 5 to 10 to 12-year window that are very experienced employees, and if we start seeing an exodus of those folks, it costs a lot to hire and retrain folks. So this will be something that we talk about as we go further into the budget. I'll certainly have a clear direction from the board on how we would proceed with that. But rather than call it a cost of living increase, rather than call it a COLA or merit, we just included funds to address compensation issues. We have several outside agency increases, $1,803 for New River Valley Senior Services, $800 is added for brain injury services. That's been a request that we've added at the end of each year, so this year we just went ahead and put it in there. An additional $87 is added for NRV Cares, $798 is added for the Fairview District Home, $579 for New River Community College, and $12,662 is added for the local match requirements for the public health budget. It's important to note that no funding was added for any new agencies or other agencies that have never been previously funded by the county. That has been the position of the board since I've been here. We get a number of requests each year from new agencies. We get a number of requests for significant increases in funding over and above what we are presenting here. But the board, the position that I've taken in the budget presentations is we will fund what we're mandated to fund, and anything beyond that, we've just told folks that we're not adding new agencies. The next steps in the budget, established and advertised tax rate and budget. We need to establish the rate and budget for advertising by next Monday, the 11th, to meet the deadline that we have set for the public hearing. Again, that does not mean that I always like to remind the board, that is not the tax rate and budget that you will necessarily adopt. It's just what does the board agree to advertise for the budget and the tax rate. The public hearing on the tax rate and the budget is currently scheduled for, I believe that's a Thursday, March 26th at 6 p.m. The tax rate and budget are set to be adopted according to the current schedule on April 15th at 6 o'clock as well. A couple of things I want to mention in closing. There are 2 meetings that we still need to schedule in addition to all the meetings we've already scheduled. One is a meeting to review and discuss the options that are available to us for health insurance. I did send out an email to everyone this afternoon. We checked with the consultant and determined that Tuesday, March 19th was also a date that he could be available. And so I'm recommending that if the board is in agreement with that, that we set that for Tuesday the 19th at 6 o'clock. That will probably be a fairly lengthy meeting because we need to have quite a bit of discussion about the various options that are available to us at this point for health insurance. Also, the other meeting that we need to have, as you're aware, the school board met last Thursday to spend some time talking about their infrastructure and capital needs. We need to have a similar discussion about where we are with capital. As I mentioned, I'm recommending the 2-cent real estate tax increase that be set aside to begin to address future school capital needs. We have a number of county issues as well. We've got the libraries that, in my opinion, within the next decade, we're going to need to be talking about. We continue to talk about trying to do things with parks and recreation facilities. We've had conversation already, and you've set aside some funding for an animal shelter, but we really need to focus on where do we want to be the next 10 to 15 years with the county capital needs as well. We also need to have the opportunity to look at where we are with our debt situation. And you probably saw an article in the paper over the weekend where Roanoke City was looking at their situation and advising their council on how they could be structuring debt over the next decade. We need to do something similar to that as well, so that everyone, so this board, so the school board, so the public understands what our capacity concerns are and where we anticipate those being. So that meeting will probably be in early April. The capital discussion, since it's going to involve mainly one-time funds, is not quite as pressing as the meetings we'll be having on the operational budget in the coming weeks. Before I close and ask for questions, this is probably the first budget in I have no idea how many years that Carol Edmonds has not been here to be a part of it. And I would ask everyone to continue to keep Carol in your thoughts and prayers as her mother's going through a very difficult situation. Also, today, my other right arm, Judy Kaiser, came down ill and she left. So if it weren't for these three people sitting right here, and Vicki and DP and Nancy, I'd have probably run out of the building screaming at some point. But I do want to thank Angie and Mark for all the hard work they've done. They've been a tremendous sounding board as we've gone through this process. Ruth did a wonderful job reviewing the budget message and helping make sure that my North Carolina twang gets edited out of it a little bit. And then Vicki, and making sure the information gets to you guys, has been a big help as well. But at this point, that's the presentation. I know that it's a lot to absorb. We've, again, provided the books to you. You can have a hard copy if you want one. We also have it on Dropbox. And I look forward to talking with you over the next couple of weeks about how we move forward with this budget process. And I'll be glad at this point, if there are any questions, Mr. Chair, to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of anybody at this time? Matt?
Do you want just a couple different things. On slide 2, you talked about eliminating the revenue stabilization fund, and I was wondering if you could just say a thing or two about why, the reasoning behind that.
Y'all want to take a crack at that? I've got an answer, but I want to see if theirs matches mine.
Sure.
The reason that we put the revenue stabilization fund in was because of the downturn in the economy. We weren't sure what was going to happen with our revenue structure. And what we're seeing is that the revenue has stabilized, and we've had 2 years in which we've exceeded our estimates. So it seemed like a good time, considering how much money we've already set aside for reserve funds, that it would be okay to pull that out, given the fact that we have a reserve funds in place.
All right, thank you.
And that did match my answer. So.
Good. Second question, I don't know if you could answer this or not, but the revenue that the county receives from the sales tax, from state sales tax, do we foresee that being affected by the transportation bill, which does move some money from the existing sales tax away from the general to transportation? Or is that more of a long-term concern, or is it going to hit us?
I don't think we've looked at anything in the short term to determine what impact that may have. Long term, it's of concern simply because they've just put another responsibility, the state is putting another responsibility on the back of the general fund. Yeah. And I don't have a numerical answer for that, but I would just say as a general word of caution that it's something we're going to have to watch very closely. I think we need to be concerned about it. I think the schools certainly need to be concerned about it, because while I think they were trying to improve transportation funding, and I think they did a reasonable job of providing additional revenue, I don't agree with the approach that they've used, because it puts other programs in jeopardy in the future if funding comes up short.
Thank you. And then the last thing is just a very functional thing. It's actually maybe more of a question for Ruth. It's just how quickly can we get the PDF up on the website so that it's available for the public, for the budget book?
I can turn it on as soon as I leave this meeting.
Okay, excellent.
All the documents are prepared, the press release is prepared.
Fantastic.
The rule is you guys hear it first, then we flip it on. So.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Gary, did you have something? No? No?
Go ahead, please go down.
In regards to the state dollars, that is the $600,000, as I understand it, is tied. The school board would then have to get the full $600,000 would have to give the raises. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
All right. So that having that is still contingent on one, them making that decision, and two, also having the funds available to be able to look at that 2% raise?
That's correct.
Okay.
Of the 3.6 million that the schools requested as the additional funding they needed to close all their gaps, the budget recommends funding about 2.2 of that, so it's about $1.4 million difference.
Because I think their total number was 4.2, and then the 600,000 got it down to about 3. Okay.
I believe that's correct.
Out of the school state dollars, approximately, was it about $450,000 that was tied to those raises? Was there additional, or was it the full 600,000?
A little over 400,000, yes, sir.
Is that in the in this, or could I get that number? Okay, thank you very much.
We'll find it.
Okay, Mary?
Okay, I was just going to ask, we were, talking about on page 16, the $500,000 to address compensation issues. I was trying to get straight in my head. You were saying you were going to use it for disparity issues, or like, somebody starting out like at year 1 is making the same as somebody that's been here 6 years. I'm not sure how. Are you talking about in the same job?
Yes, ma'am.
And that, I don't know how that happened, but
It happened in the way we've provided increases over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's that's probably going to be the subject of about a 30-minute conversation one night, because what's happened is with our pay and classification system, when we hired people 4 and 5 and 6 years ago, the way they've been provided increases over the years versus when we have to go out and hire new people now and pay a market rate to be able to get those people, we've created a log jam in the middle of the system. Initially, we talked about a 2% across the board increase, and I actually got considerable feedback from employees and department heads that said, Craig, all we're doing is shifting the issue. Everybody appreciates additional funds, and they were very thankful for that. But as we talked about that, the concern was you're shifting the issue 2%, and so we feel like in this environment right now that we have some pretty good information, now's the time to try to address that. My biggest concern is we have, as I said earlier in the message, we have a number of employees in that 5 to 10 to 12 year range that are now only making slightly more than employees that we've hired in the last 2 years. And the reason the people we've hired in the last 2 years are making what they're making is that's what you have to pay to get them to take a position. But then you've got people that have 5 to 7 to 8 years of service that are only slightly above that. And the concern, that's definitely an issue for morale. It's an issue for performance. And rather than just say, let's give everybody X% or let's do a certain thing, I'm asking that we just set aside a pool of funds to try to address that. Now, I'll certainly go over how I plan to address that with the board. The study that we've had done is nearly complete. There's still some issues there, but that'll be something that we review as we go through the next couple of weeks as well.
so when someone applies to the county, there's not a set starting salary for a job. It's like if you really want them, you will go past. I know sometimes that happens, but
we have a pay range for each position that's a minimum, midpoint, and maximum. The midpoint is where an employee should be after so many years of service when they're at what we call market rate. The minimum is the minimum amount that we'll pay an employee to start a position. Sometimes we don't start employees at the minimum simply because in order to get someone with those skills and abilities, you have to pay more than that minimum salary to get them. And that's what's created our challenge.
Yeah, I can see how things would get out of whack really fast with that.
Well, it's one of those things that I've said over the years. You get what you pay for.
And then my other concern is under public safety and public education. And I guess because I haven't been at liaison meetings or anything, but what about this whole school safety issue that's coming down the pike as far as looking at the schools, and I don't know if we look at county buildings too, but to ensure safety of children within schools? To me, I don't know. because I don't really know what's going on there. But it seems like that might be a price tag that might be attached to that in some manner, and I just wondered, I didn't see anything in here addressing that. Is that something that's sort of flowing back and forth right now and we don't know about it, or how's that going to be handled?
From what I understand, Supervisor Biggs, the schools have added some technology in those facilities with buzzer systems and whatnot to try to further ensure that folks just can't enter the buildings without being properly identified and cleared. There's been no discussion, to my knowledge, at this point about adding any additional personnel for schools. I don't know what the discussion's going to be in the months ahead. I know that, as I said, they've identified needs for addressing the entrances and the doors at the schools, but nobody's had any conversation, at least at our level yet, as far as the need for any additional positions.
Okay.
Is
Ms. Perkins?
is there any discussion on the state level for additional funds for school safety?
I haven't heard of any. I don't know.
I thought I heard it from someplace.
We've been watching what's been going on at the General Assembly, and there's stuff on both sides that came out of the conference report that supported additional school resource officers. And so there's money at the state level. We just don't have the details as to how that's going to affect us yet.
But it will be for the resource officers only? Is that
That's what was listed in the report. It was school resource officers to address safety concerns at schools.
Okay.
That is, thank you for that.
Anybody else?
Correct.
Do we have a motion to go to work session?
I was going to ask,
Go ahead, I'm
just
sorry.
follow up on that, the same thing. Is there anything in from the federal government coming down that you know of? Of course, right now we have sequestration. There's certain things they exempted in sequestration, so
No, we haven't heard anything at the federal level, and I apologize. I did forget that there was money in the they haven't figured out how they're going to apply it yet. So the short answer was we don't know. The long answer is once it comes out, maybe we'll have more information once the final budget's presented. I do appreciate you bringing that up because I didn't mention it in the budget message. With sequestration, there is some concern that our QSCAP bonds that we have may be affected in some way. As you're aware, some of those that we pay the full amount of interest and then we're rebated a portion of that interest. Some are called credits and some are called subsidies. We're not real sure yet how this is going to affect those. It could wind up costing us some additional debt service dollars because the feds may not subsidize or rebate the full amount that has been agreed on. So as we have more information on that, we'll certainly pass that on to you as well. Folks, I really appreciate your attention. Again, I've provided you with a whole bunch of information that I know you'll spend time going through and looking at, and I look forward to the discussion in the days ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion to go to work session?
so moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Mr. Powell?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Chair Lewis?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Let's go eat.